Welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where we discuss amazing books written by talented authors. For Book Lovers Only Live Radio is a proud member of the Village Connector Media Network. If you love books, we have a home for you. Now time for your host and chief book lover, Rob Brown.
Hey book lovers, welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover. So excited that you are joining us today. I hope you're having a great Sunday. Although we have only a few days left of summer, we have some really exciting and talented authors coming your way in October, November, and December, so stay tuned. I'm super excited about our guest author today. I actually had the pleasure of attending one of her diversity and inclusion seminars a few years ago, and it was absolutely awesome. I learned a lot. Her name is Kathleen Nalty, and we will be calling her in just a few minutes. But before we get on the phone with Kathleen, I wanted to thank last week's call-out guest. His name is Ron Craig, and his book, The Little Witch and the Lost Boy, and his upcoming book, The Little Witch and the Magic Gift. The Lost Boy is available to purchase from our website at www.forbookloversonly.com, and the Magic Gift will be available for purchase when Ron releases it as well, which should be in a couple of months. So we'll keep you posted about that release. Now, while you're there, if you're not yet a member, please join our Book Lovers Club. We have a newsletter that we will blast out periodically, and we'll also be giving away some great prizes to our book lovers in contests we'll have in the fall. So don't miss out. That's www.forbookloversonly.com. That's www.forbookloversonly.com. And I also wanted to invite you to join the Village Connector community. They are our main strategic alliance partner. The Village Connector community is an organization that promotes the evolution of humanity by creating an environment where people work together to improve the quality of life for themselves and their neighbors. While they are an internet-based organization, they touch communities across the world through their television and radio networks based here in beautiful downtown Laurel, Maryland. Their mission is to encourage people to invest in themselves through personal development and to then work together with others who commit themselves to personal evolution. The three foundational pillars of the Village Connector community mission are personal development, community economics, and health and wellness. Now, you can join the Village by simply visiting villageconnector.com and giving your name and email address. That's it. It's absolutely free, but the benefits and education you receive to make your life and the lives of those in your community better will last an absolute lifetime, I assure you. So be sure to join the Village today. Now, a piece of book trivia, and I also want to talk about some upcoming book festivals. For our book trivia today, Arundhati Roy, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, author of The God of Small Things, which won the Man Booker Prize for Fiction in 1997, is known as the biggest selling book by a non-expatriate Indian author. So it's a very interesting piece of book trivia. She is a phenomenally talented author, and if you haven't read The God of Small Things, you need to get that book. It's an amazing, amazing book. Now for some upcoming book festivals. The 2017 South Dakota Festival of Books is coming up. It's going to span 4 days from Thursday, September 21st to Sunday, September the 24th at the Deadwood Mountain Grand Holiday Inn Resort at 1906 Deadwood Mountain Drive in Deadwood, South Dakota. Now, although it's being held in Deadwood, there will be also events in Rapid City, Sturgis, and Lead. It attracts about 8,000 readers and writers every year. Presenters attending include Mike Artell, Molly Barari, Lawrence Diggs, and Virginia Driving Hawk Sneeve. Now, while most of the event is free, some special events require tickets to purchase. You can learn more and download a festival guide even at www.sdhumanities.org/festival-of-books/. That's www.sdhumanities.org/festival-of-books/. And locally here, I'm excited about this one. We have the Baltimore Book Festival. at Baltimore Inner Harbor, Friday, September the 22nd until Sunday, September the 24th. The hours are 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be hundreds of authors and book lovers on hand. Book signings, a few celebrity chefs to do some cooking demos, street theater, live music, and over 100 exhibitors and booksellers. For more information, please visit www.baltimorebookfestival.com/home. That's www.baltimorebookfestival.com/home. Looks like it's going to be some amazing, really exciting and fun book festivals around the country. So make sure if you're in those respective areas, check them out. Now, time for our guest for today. Our today's call-out guest is a former practicing attorney who has devoted her professional career to her passion for diversity, civil rights, and inclusion. Now, over the years, she has advised law firms of all sizes, corporate law departments, and government legal offices. She is an independent consultant, and her forte is advising and creating strategies for clients to make their workplaces more inclusive. She's recognized that in most legal organizations, there's a huge gap between intention and action on diversity and inclusion. The disconnect lies in the fact that there is limited guidance about specific ways to fix the diversity dilemma. Her book, Going All In on Diversity and Inclusion, addresses these issues head on, and we are going to call Kathleen right now.
Hello, this is Kathleen.
Hi, Kathleen. This is Rob Brown at For Book Lovers Only Live Radio. How are you?
Hi, Rob. I'm doing well. How are you today?
Doing great, doing great. Well, we want to thank you so much for being our guest on today's show, and I want to give you an opportunity to kind of introduce in your own words yourself to our listeners and our viewers.
Sure. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be on the show. I am a person who's a lifelong advocate for diversity and inclusion. I'm a lawyer by trade, but right now I'm a consultant, and I help all kinds of organizations figure out how to make diversity sustainable by adding inclusiveness to those diversity efforts. So that's what I'm doing right now. My legal career actually started at the U.S. Department of Justice, where I was a federal civil rights prosecutor working on cases involving slavery, hate crimes, and I even prosecuted police brutality cases. So that's where I got my start, but my passion right now is focused on diversity and inclusiveness, especially in the workplace.
I see. So let's kind of go back now. With regards to diversity and inclusion, did you start to see maybe that there could potentially be an issue even when you were in law school, or was it something that you noticed when you were actually as a practicing attorney in the workplace?
You know, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, the issues around diversity were absolutely apparent as soon as I entered this profession. But what's really striking is that those issues haven't changed. Here we are over 30 years later, and not only women, but lawyers of color, LGBTQ lawyers, lawyers with disabilities are still struggling with some of the headwinds that they face practicing law.
So it's just a problem that kind of perpetuates itself year after year after year. So why did you decide to actually write a book about this?
Well, I founded a nonprofit in the Denver legal community that focused on adding inclusiveness to the conversation in the legal industry so that diversity, legal organizations could actually make diversity work. And I led that organization for 5 years, but what I saw was we got to a certain point in terms of diversity and inclusion in the legal industry, but then we sort of were just treading water. And I knew that leaders of legal organizations, especially law firms, were committed to diversifying their organizations, but they just didn't know what to do. They didn't know what inclusiveness meant, and they certainly didn't know how to change things in their organization to make them more inclusive. So after I left the nonprofit and started my consulting practice, I sat down to write a book that was incredibly practical, that walked a law firm leader through the steps that they needed to take to not only advance diversity in their organizations, but to make them more inclusive. And my book is really different from a lot of the books out there on this topic because it includes really, really practical tools. So, for example, one of the tools in the book is a maturity model. Law firm leaders don't know how to measure their progress with respect to diversity and inclusion except to look at the numbers. But as long as you're chasing the numbers, you're not focusing on building the inclusiveness of the organization that will actually make the numbers work better. So this maturity model allows a law firm leader to figure out where they are now, and it gives them some sight lines to what they could put into place to advance diversity and inclusion in their organization. So that's one of the tools. Another one is a D&I Competencies Framework. Because the legal industry, this concept of inclusion really is only about 10 years old for the legal industry. And very, very few legal organizations have competencies around diversity and inclusion. So in my effort to provide a really detailed practical roadmap for law firm leaders, I created a competencies framework that you can look at the framework and assess yourself. Are you unskilled at inclusiveness, skilled, or highly skilled? So that allows leaders to hold themselves accountable for developing this critical 21st century skill set around inclusiveness, but also drop some of these competencies into people's job duties and responsibilities and hold them accountable for exhibiting the inclusive behaviors that not only makes diversity work in their organization, but research studies show that inclusiveness is sort of the secret sauce. It's what makes the entire organization perform better. And companies that are very, very advanced on diversity and inclusion, according to a study conducted by Deloitte, are also the most profitable, high-performing companies. So even if somebody didn't want to do this for diversity's sake, which they should, it's the right thing to do, they should do it just for the sake of making their organization perform better. So those are just two of the tools that I put into the book that would help law firm leaders do better on this topic. And by the way, Rob, I want to point out that even though the book was written for law firm leaders, the concepts in the book are completely transferable to any type of workplace setting. And I use these tools in government agencies. I use them in corporations. If you just strike out the words law firm leader and put in corporate leader or government leader or nonprofit leader, everything would be transferable. So that's another benefit of my book.
Well, I find that fascinating. So basically what you're saying is, from a business perspective, from basically almost a profit loss statement, like inclusion is simply, it's just good for business too, right?
Oh, absolutely. This study by Deloitte was really fascinating. It came out at the end of 2015, and it involved the talent management practices of over 400 companies worldwide. And Deloitte was looking at 128 talent management practices and trying to figure out which ones were the key to the greatest financial performance of these companies, and found that the 30 or so talent management practices that were correlated or predicted the highest performing companies all centered on inclusiveness. So inclusiveness, you can look at it as sort of being a broader umbrella for organizational performance. If you do well at inclusiveness as a company or a law firm, you are not only going to make your diversity efforts work better and advance diversity in your organization, but you make the entire organization perform better across the board. So inclusiveness really is the key to, the 21st century workplace performance. I mean, period. It helps engagement, productivity, innovation, creativity, as well as bottom line profits. But for my purposes, it is the key that makes diversity work. So in your organization, if you're struggling with diversity, that means that you do not have a handle on inclusiveness.
And why right now it seems that this topic is so timely? Why right now?
Well, you know what, Rob? This topic is really exploding in the last few months with the incredible uptick in overt conscious bias and hate crimes and, just protests and overt expressions of hatred against different groups in our country. My consultancy the top is just really blowing off because people want to learn more about not only how to deal with these topics in the workplace, but to address the larger problem of unconscious, unintentional bias. So even if I had a magic wand and could, magically eliminate every scrap of hatred, of conscious, overt discrimination everywhere, and especially in the workplace, we'd still be left with this unacknowledged, much larger problem of unconscious, unintentional bias. And so people are scrambling to get ahead of it. And also there's a new movement in the country among corporate America. In the middle of June, 150 CEOs signed a new pledge to take action on these issues within their companies. All of their millions of employees are going to get training on unconscious bias. They're posting their innovative practices on diversity and inclusion, and they're fostering those difficult conversations within the workplace. So the pledge was signed initially by 150 CEOs of big companies. Within 6 weeks, by the end of July, that number had doubled. And I think that the total number of companies and CEOs who are doubling down on diversity and inclusion is going to double again, at least by the end of the year. So this topic right now is huge. And that's why I'm so excited about my book and the tools that I've created. Because like I said, they're not just limited to law firm leaders. It's not just law firm leaders who are struggling with how to advance diversity and inclusion. It's every leader in every organization all across the country. And so some of these tools that I've created that are in the book can really help a leader of any organization, or just even D&I professionals, diversity and inclusion professionals, make some real progress in their organizations, diagnose some of the hidden barriers that are operating due to unconscious bias that are really causing higher attrition rates for people in underrepresented groups. Because you can't do anything about a problem unless you can actually identify it and then create a strategic action plan to address it. And the number one thing, starting an inclusiveness initiative, is you have to come to terms with unconscious bias. Because organizations, they're not full of people who are bad, ill-intentioned people who consciously and deliberately discriminate against people. Yes, there are some of those people out there, absolutely. But most organizations have pretty good, well-intentioned people who want to do better on diversity and inclusion. They just don't know what to do. And that's what my book really helps them understand and gives them the practical tools that they need to make progress on these issues.
Well, I love how instructional and hands-on this book is, but I want to dive in a little bit more about unconscious bias. And I'm reading directly from your book right now. I believe it's on page, this is 31, Interrupting Unconscious Bias. Experts believe that our unconscious is responsible for as much as 80 to 90% of thought processes. But our conscious mind is simply not capable of perceiving what our unconscious is thinking. You can be two persons at the same time. Your conscious self that firmly believes you do not have any bias against others because of their social identities, and your unconscious self that harbors stereotypes or biased attitudes that unknowingly leak into your decision making. So I think that this is a pretty eye-opening part of the book. It's one of my favorite parts of the book because it just kind of demonstrates and shows that people sometimes they act or they respond to certain situations and their unconscious is playing a larger role than they may even know.
You bet, Rob. It's actually kind of scary. Once you begin to read some of these research studies about how the unconscious part of our mind operates. Now, don't get me wrong. We have to rely on our unconscious to get us through our day, to help us make sense of the world, so we don't have to continuously reinvent the wheel. But our unconscious loves shortcuts and categories, anything that helps us be more efficient in our thinking. And guess what? Stereotypes are those shortcuts and categories that our unconscious just loves. And the faster our world becomes, the more stress we're under, sleep deprivation, cognitive overload, busy people, and I'm telling you, lawyers are in this space most of their day. That cognitive overload just really opens the door wide to our unconscious jumping in to help us out. And those shortcuts, stereotypes, biased attitudes that we don't even know we have can influence our decision-making and our thinking. And one of the most powerful cognitive biases that we have is called affinity bias. And this is really the crux of the diversity problem in the legal industry. When affinity bias is where you more naturally gravitate toward people who are like you, who share similar identities and backgrounds, you develop deeper trust relationships and friendships with them. So the legal industry, 75% of law firm partners in the United States are white men. And if they unknowingly and unwittingly gravitate toward their mini-me's, younger white male lawyers who remind them of themselves when they were younger and develop deeper relationships with them, they share more critical career-enhancing opportunities with those mini-me's. And they don't realize that just by doing that, by over-investing in their mini-me's, for lack of a better term, they're under-investing in people who are not as much like them, who are in their outsider groups. And that's the dynamic that's really killing the legal industry, and especially law firms, in terms of diversity efforts. And that can be fixed. If you have training on unconscious bias and you learn about affinity bias, you can do something about it. And that's what forward-thinking law firm leaders are doing, is offering this training on unconscious bias, waking people up to this dynamic of how affinity bias, perpetrated by good, well-intentioned people, is really causing hidden barriers that are upending the career paths of attorneys of color, female attorneys, LGBTQ attorneys, and attorneys with disabilities. It can be addressed, and that's what my book helps law firm leaders do, is diagnose some of those hidden barriers and educates them about unconscious bias.
Well, I have to say, I really enjoyed the seminar presentation that you made, I believe, at Beverage and Diamond a few years ago that I attended. That's when I first learned about your work. But I want to ask you, of all the industries and different types of works you can do, why is it that the legal industry is the least diverse of all the professions?
And Rob, this is a point of deep concern for me, because lawyers are my people. And to realize this year that lawyers have fallen to last place compared to all other professions in the U.S. with respect to race and ethnicity is honestly kind of shameful. And the reason behind that is especially law firms, the way that they're built, they basically allow a lot of different kinds of unconscious cognitive biases to thrive. So first of all, there's affinity bias. And law firm partners have a huge amount of discretion in who they work with, who they give work assignments to, who they hire, who they socialize with in the workplace, and they do develop those deeper work relationships with younger lawyers who are more like them. So that gives a huge leg up to white male lawyers, to be quite frank. The other thing is there are a couple of other unconscious biases that are in play here. Status quo bias and system justification bias. The lawyers who are running law firms, the status quo is a very powerful influence for them. And system justification bias, they can't see the hidden barriers operating because the hidden barriers don't impact them and never have. And if they've played such a large role in creating this organization, they're not going to be really amenable to hearing criticism of it, especially if they can't see the hidden barriers. So between affinity bias, status quo bias, system justification bias, and other types of cognitive biases, it's very difficult for them to begin to even understand that their organization is not a meritocracy where everyone has an equal chance. It's a mirrorocracy where the people who are more like those who are in charge will get more of those intangible opportunities, and others will just simply be left out and left behind. So you can't even begin to have a conversation with a law firm leader until they can begin to see some of the inequities that are actually happening right in front of them in their organizations. So that's a huge challenge for any law firm leader. But I know many law firm leaders who are having these revelations, who are learning about their unconscious biases. And once you can see where the hidden barriers are, you can begin to address them. And that's the crux. That's the heart of work around inclusiveness.
Wow, that's really profound. They're not a meritocracy, but a mirrorocracy. Wow. I mean,
yes.
That's so eye-opening. So for our attorneys that are watching, book lovers, any law firm partners that are watching, as we wrap up, if you can give them one piece of advice to at least start the dialogue or start the action towards inclusion, what would you tell them?
Well, Rob, I have to tell you, and this is just the truth. My book has been so eye-opening for a lot of law firm leaders. I've had law firm leaders pick up the book, which is only, the main content is only 94 pages long. And, they can read that really quite quickly. And I've had a law firm managing partner read my book and then walk into a meeting of his peers and begin to completely change the message to be able to convince them of where these hidden areas may be that need to be addressed and the business necessity for doing so. So, if I would tell anybody just one thing, it would be to get a copy of my book. I know that sounds really self-promoting, but honestly, it's a game changer. This book is a real game changer.
Oh,
the other thing,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, one other thing would be to get unconscious bias training in your organization. It really produces tremendous ahas, and people will only change their behaviors and the structures of the organization to be more inclusive once they have those revelations.
Well, that's amazing. And, this is the place to promote this very, very important book. This should actually be required reading for all law firms across the United States. The book is Going All In on Diversity and Inclusion, the Law Firm Leader's Playbook. And Kathleen, if people want to learn more about your organization, your website is KathleenNaltyConsulting.com.
Yes. And it's spelled KathleenNalty. I get confused with the actor Nick Nolte quite a bit, so there's some confusion on the spelling. Just wanted to clear that up. Sorry.
Absolutely. We understand. So it's KathleenNaltyConsulting.com. And if you want to follow Kathleen on social media, her Twitter handle is @KathleenNalty, spelled Nalty. Kathleen, thank you so much, first of all, for writing this critically important book. We are so excited that you're on our show to talk about it. And if you're out there, if you're watching, if you're of any leadership position whatsoever, whether it be in a law firm or a corporation or any other type of organization, get this book. This book is going to make your organization much more efficient, much richer, and ultimately it'll be more profitable, and it's the right thing to do. So Kathleen, thank you so much, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so much, Rob. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, we want to thank Kathleen for stopping by virtually for our show. We look forward to hearing more about any other books that she's going to write, but definitely get a copy of her book, Going All In. We're out of time, but be sure to join us in the coming weeks. I'm actually going to be interviewing some great authors, including a Western novelist, and he's going to tell us about his inspiration for writing and some of the tough outlaws and lawmen in his books. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover, and this is For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. Take care. I'll see you next time.